Hi, we're here. Welcome. This is the first live hangout with me. It's part of the Aperitivo Lounge. Now, I'm not currently in my home. You might recognize that I'm somewhere different. We had a barbecue with friends this afternoon, and in Sicily today, it's been like 21 degrees. So it's been really, really mild. And as a result, we had a barbecue and I didn't quite have time to make it home. So I'm sitting here doing the live hangout from my friend's room. So I hope that you can hear me okay. I hope that everything is going to be okay during this session. This is my first live hangout. So I'm a little bit nervous. I hope everything works okay with the technology and with managing any questions that you have during the hangout itself. But welcome. So today I want to be talking primarily about the things that have changed for people who are moving to Italy in 2025, because I really do believe that there are many things that are different now compared to previous years. And so I really and truly want to address this in today's live stream. And also, if you have any questions, you can feel free to put them into the chat and I will answer them during the live stream itself. But in terms of where everything is, I have a behind the scenes video coming tomorrow, which will share with you exactly what is happening with our house hunting at the moment, because really that has been a bit of a challenge for us at the moment. And it's the first thing that I want to say that people who are moving to Italy in 2025 might find difficult, and that is the availability of housing. And this is something that I have to be honest, I didn't really consider before. I really believed that, up until now, because I'd always been able to find somewhere to live and I never had a problem in that respect, I just took it for granted that it would still be as easy in 2025 as it has been in previous years. But things have changed. Like, as I've said before, certain parts of Italy have definitely become, in a way, victims to over tourism. And, I'm talking about the province of Salerno because that is, of course, where we intend to move to. Like 2, 3, 4 years ago, people didn't even really know where Salerno was. I remember, I used to say to people, "Oh, I live in Salerno," and people would be like, "Where?" And then I'd be like, "Oh, it's near Naples," and then they'd be like, "Ah, okay." Or I'd be like, "It's near Amalfi," and people would be like, "Ah, okay." But now, Salerno has become the place on everybody's lips, and it's like where everybody wants to have a base, have a home, and as a result, it really has become a little bit overpriced for the majority of people that might want to live there on a long-term basis. And aside from the fact it's overpriced, it also means that there are less houses available for people. A lot of the contracts now are transitorial. So I have to be honest with you, it's really, really difficult. Abby, I've just seen your comment. Thank you. Thank you for joining. I'm so glad, it's super helpful. My channel is this. I always share with you the reality and I share with you the beauty of South Italy. But I know that some people, they struggle because people have a romantic image of life in South Italy. And unfortunately, it's not always as beautiful as you might have imagined. But I truly believe if you come here and you're educated and you truly know what to expect from your experience here, you will have an incredible time. But it's the people that come here and they come here under the illusion of the fairy tale that really struggle. And so I'm really glad that my content has helped you. So thank you so much. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me and I will answer. But yes, as I was saying, Salerno has become a place now where everybody wants to stay. And as a result, housing has been really difficult for us to find. And so this is something you have to consider. If you plan to move to Italy this year, you've got to consider that some places in Italy now are tourist bubbles. And as a result, it's going to be very difficult for you to find somewhere affordable to live in those places, or even available to live on a long-term basis. And This is why I stress to you that you need to do your research. Like, moving to Italy is a wonderful thing to consider, but you have to think about where in Italy you want to live, and most importantly, what it is that you want to gain from your experience here. Because you see, Italy is very divided. I struggle sometimes on my channel because I will talk about South Italy, and everybody reminds me how different South Italy is to Central Italy or to North Italy or to the islands. And I'm constantly facing this kind of opposition from people who want to tell me just how different South Italy is to the rest of the country. And so, this is why you must do your research. You absolutely need to do your realistic research on the different parts of Italy and understand what area could work best for you. But also try not to go to the popular towns and cities for the reasons that I've mentioned before. Like Salerno being, somewhere that is now extremely expensive, means that actually you want to start looking further out in the province rather than in the centre itself, because the province is just, well, it's ridiculous now. And so you've really got to do your research in that respect. You've also got to consider as well the price of rental properties here. Now, I'm a big believer that you should rent here before you buy. And this might be a bit controversial because people sell you the dream of the €1 home, or they sell you the dream of buying somewhere where you can renovate it. And there are lots of videos on YouTube that will talk about this. But I really want to be realistic with you. Those kinds of projects take up a lot of time and also a lot of money. And so if you want to invest that time and money, then maybe it could be something for you. But please know, especially with the €1 homes, there are always terms and conditions and stipulations that come into that mean that you have to live your life in a particular way. So some people buy these €1 homes and they think that they can live there just for 6 months in a year and then come back, 6 months later. But the whole purpose of this €1 home scheme is that you want to rejuvenate towns and cities where, populations have rapidly decreased in, the past few years. And so they want people to live there on a long-term basis. This is not the project for Airbnbs or holiday lets. It's the project for people to put down permanent roots. And so you have to consider that at all times, because people don't often think about it in this way. And I really and truly want you to remember that if you are tempted by this €1 home scheme, please know there is so much work involved. These properties are shells. They are not the beautiful finished pieces that you see people talk about on social media. They are shells. They are very difficult to renovate, very expensive to renovate. And sometimes they come with particular terms and conditions that you have to invest X amount of money into the renovation, and then you have to commit to living there for X number of years. It's really not as straightforward as it seems. And so I think that part isn't as easy as some people might think. And then when it comes just generally to buying somewhere, I really think it's better sometimes to spend some time in Italy on a bit of a long-term basis and understand where you think you want to put down roots. When you buy somewhere, that's a very permanent decision. And you have to think that, that might not be the best thing for you. And so renting, I honestly believe, is the best thing to begin with, because you can spend a couple of years or just a year if you take a transitory or lease in a place, and then decide if you think that is the best location for you before you start to go through the kind of long-term procedure of buying a home here. I really and truly believe this is the best way to go. And this is why at nearly 6.5 years later, I still haven't bought a home here, because I'm still figuring out where it is I want to permanently settle. and kind of what home I want, I don't think there's a rush. I think renting somewhere, especially when this isn't your country, it is honestly the best way to begin this kind of experience. So, this is what I would say about this. You've got to consider where in Italy you want to move to. Consider over tourism because it is becoming a problem in this country. This is going to impact availability and pricing. You've got to think about whether you want to rent or buy. I don't recommend buying straight away. I recommend living here for a little bit first. Also, to make sure it's the country for you. Like, let's be honest, I speak about this a lot, but Italy is not a country for everyone. It's difficult to live here. And so, as a result, I really believe that you need to spend some time here to understand if it's the right place for you. You know, as I said in today's video, I don't know if you've seen it, but I posted a video today talking about whether it's really worth moving to Italy. And as I said in that video, we are not carbon copies of one another. What is right for me may not be right for you. And that is the reason why I truly believe you must spend some time here to figure that out for yourself. And when you do spend time here as if you're a local. Don't go and stay in a hotel initially. Go hire an Airbnb, go hire a holiday home, and try to live your life as if you were living here, because that is going to really give you a flavor of what your experience could be like. Now, aside from housing, and of course, aside from talking about whether or not you want to rent or buy, you've got to think about the weather as well. I really believe 2025 is going to bring about a lot of problems with the weather here in Italy. We've been experiencing it in 2024. Like, you know, we've had droughts here in Sicily. Like, we've been on a drought alert for the past few months. Even in Palermo, where I'm currently living, we've had situations where the water will be switched off for a day or two in certain towns and regions to try to regulate the flow of water to the city before being switched on again. And it alternates between different areas to try to control the flow of water. It's been a real problem. And unfortunately, this drought situation has also affected the kind of agricultural industry. So it's a really big thing. And I have to be honest, I can only see it getting more problematic as the months roll on because, you know, the climate is, well, it's in a bit of a free fall situation at the moment. We've only got to look at kind of world events to understand that, you know, we've got a bit of a problem on our hands, particularly because here in Italy, like, I've been living here for 6.5 years, and every single summer is hotter than the summer before. When I first moved here in 2018, I do not remember the summers back then being as hot as they are today. Like, the summers here now are incredibly hot. And, you know, it's normal for us to have temperatures of like 40 degrees. And, you know, that's really difficult. Like, it's amazing if you're on holiday, you can relax, you can go and swim in the sea. But when you're working and you've got commitments, it's hard. It's really, really hard to maintain your life in those types of temperatures. So you've got to think about this. The further south you go, the hotter it gets. Here in Sicily, I would say you probably experience some of the hottest temperatures in all of Italy. Consider, like, today, January 26th, I've had my first barbecue of 2025 in temperatures of like 21 degrees. This is December. Oh, not even December. This is winter. It's crazy. Like, you know, this is what I'm trying to say to you. Global warming and, you know, the problems with temperature, it's a real thing. And if you are somebody who doesn't really manage very well in the heat, you've got to consider this, because it is going to impact whereabouts in Italy you want to move to. Now, let's also talk about the north of Italy. You've probably seen in the news the terrible floods that devastated the northern parts of Italy last year. that is something that is becoming more frequent and more common here in Italy. And I really see that becoming more of a regular occurrence as the months roll on. And so you've really got to factor this into your decision about moving here, because the climate is changing, that is impacting Italy and the weather that we're experiencing. And of course, it's going to impact you and what you're going to experience living here. So these are some very, very important considerations to think about. Now, I'm going to pause here because I've been speaking for about 15 minutes about the things you need to be aware of. If you have any questions, please put them into the chat. As I've said before, this is my first live stream and live hangout. So I hope that you can hear me okay. I hope that the audio and video is okay. I'm really happy to be doing this because I want the possibility to connect with even more of you and to help even more of you in terms of moving to Italy and really considering this country as your home. And I know that there are lots of other content creators on YouTube who do a brilliant job of showing you what Italy is like. But I'm all about showing you the reality because I think that's what benefits you the most. And that is what's going to help you the most in terms of your decision to move here. So, yes, if you have any questions, please let me know. So we've spoken about 3 important factors that you must consider if you are thinking of moving to Italy in 2025 and how those things have changed: availability of housing, whether or not you're going to rent or buy, and of course the weather. Now, I also want to talk a little bit about bureaucracy as well, because this is something that Italy is a little bit notorious for. If you mention Italy to an Italian person, apart from food, guaranteed the next thing they will talk about is the bureaucracy. It is so complicated here. And I can only see that increasing into 2025. It's not easy to live here for the bureaucracy. There are so many things that you have to consider, from your taxes through to your healthcare, through to your residency. There are so many different aspects. If you're working here, you've got to consider your contract. You've got to consider like all the bureaucracy surrounding that. It can be really, really complicated sometimes. And it's not easy coming here as an expat, as an immigrant, trying to set your life up in this country, because it's just complicated. The systems here are antiquated, particularly here in the South. A lot of work is still like paper documents in binders. Even in like 2025, you will go into these offices and you will see bookcases filled with binders of paperwork. Like, you know, there are a lot of systems here that still operate as if it were like the 1960s. It's so hard. And it's so difficult as well, because I can see that Italy is trying. I can see that, you know, the north of Italy, they really, really try, because, you know, they have appointments that you can book online for in-presence visits, and they really make an effort. However, the further south you go, the less that actually happens, because, for example, we needed to book an appointment with the Tari office. Now, the Tari office is the rubbish tax office here in Italy, and the rubbish tax is considered to be one of the most important taxes that you have to pay here. And we needed to book an appointment to speak to them because, unfortunately, the residency office didn't speak to the Tari office, which they were supposed to, and we hadn't been registered for this tax. So we took the initiative and tried to arrange this appointment ourselves. And we were told that the next available appointment online was 1 year from the date that we checked in. In fact, it's June in 2025. This is what you've got to deal with in South Italy. It's so frustrating. And so I think into 2025, I foresee, especially here in the South, more problems with bureaucracy. I see that, offices cannot cope with the workload here in the South, especially. There are not enough people that work in these offices. Also, if you're coming from another country, sometimes they don't understand the different rights that you have in this country, and you have to educate them on the procedures. And I'm talking from personal experience because, as most of you know, I'm from the UK. And so, in this sense, I came here before Brexit, when, the UK was part of the EU and everything was a dream. And then post Brexit, I had to apply for the Carta di Soggiorno to, make sure everything was okay with my stay here. And that wasn't supposed to be a compulsory move. That was supposed to be something you did just to make your life a bit easier. But as the months have rolled on, those British citizens who have lived here pre-Brexit, who didn't bother to apply for the Carta di Soggiorno because it wasn't mandatory, they have faced countless problems with like government offices because they don't have this Carta di Soggiorno. Because government offices here are not briefed properly. They are not told properly what they need to do. They don't often understand what it is they need to do. And so it can be really, really difficult sometimes to explain yourself. Consider when I moved here from Salerno to Palermo, it took me 6 months for my residency to be changed. And this is a process that should only take a maximum of 40 days. But the reason it took me so long is because they didn't know how to process my Carta di Soggiorno. They were treating it as a permesso di soggiorno, which you would have if you come from a country outside of the EU. And with that, there are different responsibilities and kind of things that you have to meet. But I didn't have that, and they didn't know how to deal with it. And so as a result, I had this kind of extreme waiting time for my residency to be changed, when it shouldn't have ever taken that long. And so you've got to get used to this. I really feel as we enter into 2025, this is not a situation that's going to improve. I foresee it either staying the same or declining even more, depending on where you are in Italy. So you definitely need to brace yourself for the bureaucracy here. It's not an easy thing at all to get used to. And I really think that it can cause you a lot of headaches if you're not careful. So really and truly get used to the bureaucracy here as soon as you can. Now, another thing that you need to kind of consider if you're thinking of moving to Italy in 2025, which I think has changed since I've been here, is kind of like the political climate. Now, I don't like to talk about politics very much on my channel, I have to be honest. But yeah, it's important for you to know that the government that are currently in place here in Italy are quite firm in certain respects. They're quite right-wing in terms of some of their beliefs. And so as a result, they are not, for example, pro kind of gay or lesbian couples. They are not for this at all. They are very traditional in their mindset. And so the policies that the government adopt can be quite controversial here sometimes. And I have to be honest with you, like, a lot of Italian people do not agree with the government here. They are not in agreement with their policies. They are not in agreement with the kind of mindset they have about immigration and various other subject matters. And so you have to consider this. I know some people want to leave America because of the Trump administration, and I completely understand why you might think that. But please know that Italy, under the Meloni administration, is quite hardcore in terms of its beliefs and what it wants to achieve. And so as a result, it's not necessarily going to be very easy to stay here. And so this is why I want to stress to you that you shouldn't necessarily move here based on running away from what you're experiencing in America. because I promise you, here in Italy, we have our own problems, and we have our own problems with the government and their beliefs. And so we sometimes think the grass is greener on the other side, but it isn't always. So I just want to say this just to kind of give you some food for thought, because sometimes the decisions that are made here at a governmental level are quite controversial, and not every Italian citizen agrees with them. So we've spoken so far, for those of you that might have just joined now, we've spoken so far about the availability of housing. We've spoken about whether you should rent or buy. We've spoken about the climate. We've spoken also about like the political landscape and the bureaucracy, of course. I could never do a live stream talking about moving to Italy and not mention that word. But if you have any questions about moving to Italy, please pop them into the chat, and I will do my best to answer them in this live stream for you. In terms of other things that I want to talk about that you have to be prepared for if you're moving to Italy in 2025 and things have changed, we're going to talk about cost of living, because people believe that Italy is a cheaper place to live compared to other countries around the world. And on one hand, I would say that is true, depending on where in Italy you live. If you live in the south of Italy, then yes. If you're coming from America, or you're coming from a country where the cost of things, is pretty high, you could very well be like, oh my goodness, this is so cheap. Like, consider when I moved here from the UK back in 2018, I would go into a supermarket and I would see bottles of wine for like €2-3. And I'd be like, what? I was taking photographs and sending it back to people I knew, being like, look at the price of the wine. Like, I couldn't wrap my head around it, because coming from the UK, where wine would, easily cost at least £5 or £6 for like a basic bottle, I couldn't wrap my head around how cheap the prices were here. But then the longer I've spent here, the more I've realized how everything is relative. And what you have to consider is that, yes, the cost of life might be a little bit cheaper here in South Italy, but also so are the wages. The salaries of people here are pretty low, certainly below any minimum wage that you might be expecting. And so everything follows suit as a result. And it's interesting to see, because the prices of everything are starting to increase here, even in South Italy. Coffee in a bar has gradually been increasing and creeping up in price over the past 6 years. So when I first moved here, you could get an espresso in a bar for like 80 cents. Now it's like €1.20. Some bars, €1.60. Some even higher, depending on where you are. So the price has gradually been increasing. And yeah, people here are starting to feel it. Food is going up, the services are going up, the cost of coffee to buy for your home, like to kind of roast at home in your own machine, that too is increasing. Everything is starting to increase in price. And it's really interesting to observe this, because people here are starting to struggle. And this is something that you need to consider. People here have had the same wages for many, many years. Like, people will tell you, yes, we have a kind of minimum wage here in Italy, but it's not always enforced. There are many workers, especially here in the South, that work for so-called black money. This is money that is untaxed and kind of paid under the table. And so as a result, people struggle whenever there is any kind of an increase. And, so we've noticed it with food, but also with the cost of housing. As I touched on at the beginning, because we have this kind of problem now with over-tourism in certain parts of Italy, that is having a knock-on effect when it comes to the cost of housing. So I have seen properties in Salerno in this period that I've been looking for like €2,000 a month to rent, and some ridiculous ones at like €4,500 a month. Like, let me tell you, for an average person who lives in this part of the world, to have that kind of money to spend on rent, it's pretty absurd. And so you understand that there is this huge disparity at the moment in Italy with everything going up in price, but the wages and salaries that ordinary people earn kind of stagnating, not really in line with the prices that you can see. Now, of course, I come from London and I cannot compare in any way, shape, or form the cost of homes here to buy or to rent, because in London they are ridiculously expensive. I have seen homes here for sale that would probably buy you one room in London if you were lucky. So I totally get that everything is relative. When you compare it back to what you're used to in your own country, it might seem really cheap. But I think the longer you live here and you get used to the price of things at a local level, you start to realize that actually it can be pretty expensive here at times for certain things. And so you do have to factor that in. I can see these prices increasing in 2025. The cost of living crisis is still here. I don't see it going, anywhere anytime soon. So you have to consider this when you're thinking of moving to South Italy. What is your budget? What kind of money do you have available? Do you have extra money in case you have to pay more for things than you'd anticipated? You must think about this. It's really, really important. Now, something else I want you to think about when it comes to moving to Italy in 2025, which I think is changing a lot, is to do with work. Now, you might be lucky. You might be retiring here. You might not need to work here. You might be able to remote work if you get like a digital nomad visa, for example. But what you have to consider is basically you've really got to think about what kind of work you want to do here, because you see, when you're working here in Italy, it's very different to any other country you've worked in. I work now here in Palermo for less than the minimum wage in London. This is probably the lowest salary I've ever taken in my entire life for the job that I do here, but it's considered to be one of the better salaries in this part of the world. So this gives you a bit of an indication as to how the working world can be here, because you see, it's not easy to work here. Salaries are not very well paid here. And so you really, really must consider this if this is an option for you, like if this is what you need to do when you're living here, because you've got everything increasing in price, but your wage is not necessarily going to be equal to that. Now, I've just seen a question here. Would you say that the cost of living in or around Palermo is similar to the cost of living in Lancashire, if you know much about the Northwest? I'm from London. I have to be honest, I'm very ignorant. I don't really know much about the Northwest, but I'm pretty certain that it's probably cheaper here in Palermo, only because everything in the UK is so much more expensive now. Especially in the last 6.5 years, everything has gone up in leaps and bounds. I would say, what's cheap about Palermo? Rental properties are cheap in Palermo if you know where to look. So you can get easily a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment with a kitchen and a dining room for €600 a month, easily. Okay, this is to rent, of course. In terms of like services, you can get a cut and colour at the hairdressers for like 60 or 70 euros. Depends what you do, depends on the type of hairdresser you go to. This is the high-end hairdressers. You can go to cheaper ones and get a cut for like 20 euros. You can go and buy fruit and vegetables at a market stall, spend 15 euros and come away with like 3 or 4 massive bags full of fresh fruit and vegetables. You can go to, I don't know, the meat shop and the butchers and buy, enough meat for the week and spend at least like 20, 25 euros based on 2 people. The cost of living here is cheap, absolutely, compared to the UK. And that's dependent. It doesn't depend where you are in the UK. The cost of living here in Palermo will definitely be a lot cheaper for you. You've just got to consider, if you plan to move here, what that's going to look like on a long-term basis. Because initially when you move here, you're going to be blown away by the prices for sure. Like you can go out for a pizza and buy a whole complete pizza for like €5 or €6. Like, let me tell you, that never happens in the UK. I don't know about Lancashire, you can tell me, but certainly in London, you can never buy a whole pizza for €6. So there are certain things that are going to blow you away. There are certain things that are going to make you very happy to live here. However, please know that the longer you live here, especially if you are planning to work here, the more you are going to adjust to the price of things here, and you're going to forget the comparison and you're going to start to notice the difference. So everything is relative. At the beginning, you're going to be blown away. But if you live here for long enough and you start working here, you are going to notice that, yes, things can be a little bit more expensive than you might have imagined. And yes, there are often hidden taxes. Taxes are a thing here, by the way. The taxes here in Italy are horrendous compared to the UK. Literally, the Italian government taxes you for everything. Consider, if you win the lottery here in Italy, the Italian government take a tax off the winnings that you've won, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I never remember somebody winning the lottery in the UK and being taxed on their winnings. But here it is a thing. Now, I know the UK is in a bit of a sorry state at the moment with the Labour government and everything that's going on with that. But the Italian government, goodness, if they can get some money from you, they will. So you have to factor this in. It might seem cheaper on the surface, but when you start living here, when you start paying taxes, when you start working here, you realize that everything is relative. So that would be my answer to your question. Really and truly remember that you are, I don't know your circumstances, but if you're moving here and you're going to be working here, you've got to factor that in, because your salary is not going to be what it is in the UK necessarily. It's going to be very different. And so you're going to start to experience a different lifestyle here when you spend long enough living in South Italy. But Palermo is beautiful. I know I'm leaving Palermo to go back to Salerno, as you may have seen, but it is a really beautiful city. It's problematic. It's crazy. If you're coming from Lancashire, which I think is a really beautiful part of the world in the UK, you need to brace yourself because depending on what part of Palermo you decide to move to, it's crazy. Like literally, you will see driving that you have never seen in your entire life. You will see road maintenance. Well, let me correct that. You will see no road maintenance. It's difficult here sometimes. It's definitely not what you're used to. And that's why I say you must come here. You must spend some time here. You must adjust to life here before you decide whether or not it's really the right thing for you. Because I can sit here and I can tell you exactly what life is like here in my videos, but until you're here and you're experiencing it, even if it's just for 2 or 3 weeks, you don't really understand. You know, you've got to feel it for yourself. It's a very, very personal thing. And so that would be my answer to you in relation to that question. It's going to be different to the UK. At first, you will notice a difference in price. In the long run, I think you will adjust and you will start to see that actually things can be a little bit expensive here, you know, compared to how everything else is priced. And ultimately, if you really plan to move to Palermo, please come and spend some time here to really understand if this is the place for you, because it can be a challenging city to live in. I've loved living here for 2.5 years. I honestly don't think I would be the person I am today had I not lived here, but it has also stressed me out a lot, predominantly to do with bureaucracy, because the government offices here are incompetent, to put it politely. So you need to come here and spend some time here, 2-3 weeks, a month if you can do it. Get an Airbnb, live here as kind of close to being a resident as possible, just to really understand if you could actually hack living here on a long-term basis, particularly because it's also a dirty city as well. And this surprises so many people. Like I would say to people, look, in the tourist parts, it's beautiful. You could eat your food off the floor. But if you go into the neighborhoods where the actual residents live, it's really, really dirty. Like, we have a problem, and it usually happens every summer and also sometimes in the winter, where the rubbish collection doesn't really happen. And you just see mountains and mountains of rubbish bags. It's like living in a third world country. And you've got to remember, these are in 40-degree temperatures. So you've got the smell of rubbish that fills the air, and you've got these mountains of rubbish bags that spill onto the street. And this isn't just a one-off occurrence. Like, I've lived here now for 2.5 years, and every summer it has been the same. And even before I moved here, I would visit here every year because this is the city where my boyfriend is from, and his family all live here. And every single summer it would be the same. So you need to come here, try to spend some time here and discover if this could really be the right place for you, because it isn't a city for everyone. And there are far cleaner cities just outside of Palermo. Cefalù is a beautiful place, for example, where you might have a bit of a better experience, I would say. Yes, the cost of dining out in Palermo is incredible. Oh, you're coming back for the 5th time in May. This is amazing. Palermo is a beautiful place to visit. The cost of eating out is so cheap, like street food especially. I don't know anywhere in the UK where you could go and you could buy like something that could be considered lunch. I'm thinking arancina for like €1.80. Like, I don't know anywhere in the UK where you could buy something like that. It's amazing. And the food here is exceptional. And it's one thing that I do love about living here, because the food quality is amazing, especially in proportion to the price that you pay for it. Although local people will say to you, everything has gone up in price. People will tell you, my boyfriend does this often because he obviously grew up in Palermo. He will tell me that he used to, back in the day, buy an arancina for like, I don't know, €1.10, €1.20, and now average price is €1.80. Some places can be more. They're usually tourist traps, so be aware of that. So yeah, for local people, the prices are relative, just as I've said before. But for people coming from other countries like the UK, America, it feels really, really cheap here. Absolutely, I completely agree with that. It's so true. But Palermo's a beautiful place. And, I do think if you plan to live here, you can find somewhere very nice to live. But you just got to do your research. There are lots of different neighborhoods in Palermo. Whatever you do, if you plan to live here, avoid the Zen neighborhood. This is one of the worst neighborhoods in Palermo. It's where a lot of social housing is based. And unfortunately, there are not very nice people that live in those houses. So that's definitely not a neighborhood that you would want to move to. But other than that, there are lots of wonderful neighborhoods here, and you've just got to kind of do your research and figure out what could be right for you. So we've spoken a lot today about like the things you need to be aware of if you're planning to move to Italy in 2025. I would also say you've got to consider, like, and I said this in today's video as well, what you want to gain from your experience here. Because you see, people move to Italy and sometimes they get caught up in the romanticism of the move itself. Like, how amazing to say that you're going to go and move to Italy, right? It's incredible. However, moving to Italy, on the one hand, it sounds amazing, but in reality, it can be really, really challenging. And that's why I say to you, like, you've really got to be prepared for this, and you've got to do your research, because it is probably one of the countries that has taught me the most in the 6.5 years that I've been living here. But it's also one of the countries that has been, super, super tough for me to adjust to. I lived here during the pandemic, and I think, probably I've experienced Italy in its most kind of testing time. I spent, a lot of time in lockdown, because during the pandemic, I was actually living in Salerno, and our kind of regional governor at that time, De Luca, I think he still is the regional governor for that area, he was extremely strict. And he would keep putting Salerno into lockdown, into red alert, which meant you couldn't go anywhere, you couldn't leave your house. And even when other parts of Italy started to open up, Salerno would always remain in lockdown. And so I had a bit of a tough time during the pandemic trying to adjust to life here in this kind of situation, which was totally surreal for everyone. Um, so I think, I've had a lot of experiences here over the 6.5 years that I've been here nearly. But yeah, it's not easy, but it is a great place to move to. But you've got to be honest about what you want to gain from your experience. If you think that, you want to progress your career, if you want to grow as a person, you've got to be honest with yourself. Like, to grow as a person, you will definitely do that here. You will learn so much about yourself just through the experience alone. To progress your career, though, that is a whole other ball game, because the employment situation here is problematic. It's not easy to work here, as I've mentioned earlier. So it's probably not the best reason to want to move to Italy to progress your career, unless you're working usually in the medical sector. The medical field tends to do really well here. It's one of the fields that Italy is renowned for, is the healthcare system. And so if you want to work within that area, you could do pretty well. But you have to be realistic, because not every profession is respected here, is paid well, is compensated enough, or people really progress enough in those areas. So you've got to consider all of these aspects, absolutely. And I think as well, like 2025, I don't know about you, but it feels that 2025 is a bit of a strange year. I don't know, like we're approaching the end of January, but it feels like it's a year, a little bit of uncertainty. And so you've got to factor this in, because there's a lot of global uncertainty to do with the economy, political uncertainty. You've got to consider this when you're deciding to move abroad, absolutely, because that is going to impact your experience and the quality of life that you're going to lead. So I think this is something else that you need to really, really consider as well. So I've just seen here, my partner Flavio is from Palermo, the neighborhood of Santa Rosalia. Ah, very nice. No, Palermo is lovely. I do like it here, but maybe your partner can also understand what I'm talking about when I say about the other side of Palermo, that, the tourists don't often see. This is the problematic side of living here, absolutely. But it's a beautiful place to come and visit. It's a beautiful place to spend time in. It's a beautiful place to kind of experience real Palermo. Yes, he doesn't want to move back there. There you go. He knows very well indeed. I will say though, I feel like sometimes I can be a bit hard on Palermo, but you see, the thing is, Palermo is very real and raw and rugged. And it doesn't try to be something it isn't. Like, there are certain parts of Italy, I'm going to give the Amalfi as a great example, that can be quite pretentious. Like they're very glitz and glam. They appeal to people with big budgets. But you see, that isn't real Italy, in my opinion. Amalfi is not and never will be real Italy. That is kind of the fairy tale illusion of Italy. If you want to experience real Italy, you need to go somewhere like Naples, somewhere like Palermo, in the south anyway, and really experience how gritty Italy can be, because people never, ever in a million years expect Italy to be like how it can be here in Palermo. They've bought into the romantic illusion of life in Amalfi, or, somewhere else that's really, really beautiful, Cinque Terre, for example, like somewhere else that's really, really beautiful. And they don't realize that Italy doesn't look like that everywhere. And so you've got to come and spend time in these places for sure. Like, that is how you really understand what Italy is about. But I quite like the ruggedness of Italy. I feel like these parts of Italy really show you heart and soul. I get stressed when I cross the road here in Palermo, because people drive at you. They don't want to stop. You are an inconvenience because you're on the pedestrian crossing. But I also see an incredible warmth here and an incredible kind of community spirit that I don't think you feel in every single part of Italy. And I feel this. It's like, I can never put it very well into words, but it's something very special. And I feel like you only really understand that when you spend time in these kinds of places. when you spend time in tourist bubbles, you see what people want you to see. You don't see the reality. And that has a very different feeling to it. When you're spending time in a place which is beautiful on one part and blows you away on so many different levels, and then on the other hand, you see people rummaging through rubbish bins, people trashing the streets with their rubbish, their litter, their dog's feces, people rummaging, like looking for food. It makes you realize that that is the reality of life here. And I kind of respect Palermo in a way for being so real in that sense. And I think that's what I like the most about living here, because it's real. It's not something it isn't. I cannot stand things or people that are pretentious. I would rather people just be real, even if it's not perfect, because nothing is perfect in life at all. And I noticed living here that there is a lot of snobbery, even on this channel sometimes. People will be like, oh, it's not like that in the north of Italy. And, that's wonderful. And I'm really happy for the north of Italy, because it does, in a way, remind me more of how life is in the UK, for sure, in terms of how ordered it is, in terms of how clean it is. But I have to be honest with you, the sense of warmth that you feel in the north of Italy is not how it is in the south of Italy. People would tell me that there is a sense of coldness in the north, a little bit like how it can be in the UK sometimes. Whereas here in the south of Italy, there's definitely a warmth. People talk to you, people say hello to you, people are interested in you, even if you don't know who they are. And at the beginning, that can be quite strange to adapt to. But once you do, you feel like you are part of a community, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And so, yeah, that's something that I definitely think you should kind of consider when you're moving here, if you plan to move here, like whether or not the north, south, central, islands, whatever part is right for you, because Italy is so complicated. I find this so much. People will say to me, it's not like this in Rome, it's not like this in Milan, it's not like this in Puglia. Italy is this, and you need to spend time in different regions and different parts to understand for yourself what works for you. But I love the rawness and the vulnerability of South Italy, especially. And I think that's why I've always decided to remain here. And even though we're going back to the Salerno province, I'm still within South Italy. I don't feel inclined to move to the north of Italy, even though I'm sure there are many wonderful things that could come on the back of that. I just don't feel inclined to do it. And I think, that's it. There'll be a certain part of Italy that will captivate you, a certain part of Italy that you will feel attracted to. And that's what you must listen to. Absolutely. I think that's the most important thing. So yes, we are, my goodness, I've been talking for ages. We are like nearly last 9 minutes or so of the live stream. If you have any questions, please put them below into the chat. This is going to be available on my YouTube channel under the playlist for the Aperitivo Lounge, so you can watch it again at your leisure if you want to. It's been really nice to do this. As I said, this is the first time I've done it. I'm not at home, so it's all a bit in true Sicilian style, like kind of in this way. But I really enjoy this kind of interaction with people, because it's hard for me sometimes to express that on my YouTube channel. My videos reach thousands of people, but I don't necessarily get to have this kind of in-person interaction with you. So I think it's a really, really beautiful thing to do. So if you have any questions, now is your time to put them in before we wrap up this session. There is a behind the scenes video coming tomorrow talking about my January here in Palermo, predominantly to do with my house move, because that has been the big topic of this month. So stay tuned for that. I'm also going to be posting some members only polls this week as well in the community post, asking for your kind of feedback as to what you'd like to see on my channel. So stay tuned for that as well. And if you have any suggestions, anything you would like me to do, anything you wish that I would do, please comment either in this live stream or on my members only posts on YouTube, and let me know so that I can create content that's really, really going to help you, because essentially this is what I want to do. So yes, I'm going to start to wrap things up, I think, a little bit, because we've got like, I don't know, 7-8 minutes to go. If you have any questions, I'm here. I'm checking the chat, but I can't see any at the moment. But I hope that this live stream has helped you a little bit, just to think about some of the changes that you might experience here in Italy if you're planning to move here in 2025. Every single month in my live streams, I want to have a different kind of topic of focus just to talk about it, and then of course answer your questions in between. So this is what I've focused on for this month, but of course next month and the following months I'll be talking about different topics, just to give you the possibility to kind of hear my take on things and kind of help you, I hope, in terms of moving to or setting up your life here in Italy, because it's a beautiful country and I want you to enjoy your time here, and not be deterred from making this decision, because I know if you spend enough time in expat groups, you could very easily be swayed and decide not to move here, but I don't want you to decide that. So this is why I decided to do this membership as well. Okay. So Abby, I've just seen here, we are under some pressure to make the decision before she is to start school in September. We are leaning more towards the move, but choosing an area is proving to be the hardest part. Okay, Abby, my biggest piece of advice to you would be like, you've got to get clear on what is important to you. So do you need to be near a main city? Are you planning to drive here? Do you want to stay in Palermo? I know you said your partner is not keen. Do you want to move to Sicily? Do you want to move to a different part of Italy? In terms of your daughter starting school, is she going to go to a bilingual school, an international school here in Italy, or is she going to go to a state school? You must think about all of these things because it is really going to influence your decision. You've also got to think about kind of the quality of life you want to have here. Of course, your partner is from Palermo, so he knows very well what life is like here, but you want to think about how that is going to impact your daughter. I don't know how old your daughter is, but you've got to think about the quality of life that you will have here. And so that's going to impact whether or not you live in a city or you live in a village or a smaller town. And also like what you want to have around you, what services you want to have around you, what facilities are going to help you to lead a better life here. That is also something you must consider. I would say I love the south of Italy. The weather is beautiful. The north of Italy, I've only been a couple of times and I know that it can be quite cold in the winter. And predominantly for me, it reminds me too much of London, which is why I don't want to live there in terms of the weather. But I would say South Italy is a really good choice, but you just have to choose a part of South Italy that works for you in terms of lifestyle, convenience, and of course, the availability of schools. I know in the bigger cities, you're more likely to find international schools and bilingual schools if this is something that's important for you. Or if it's just a normal state school, for example, well, they are in pretty much every town or city that you'll find here in Italy. So you have a bit more flexibility in that case. I would also say as well, you need to consider for yourself as well, you need to just make sure that you are covered in terms of being able to live here on a long-term basis. I'm presuming because of your partner, you'll be able to stay here with that in mind, but you need to research it. If you go onto the Gov UK website, living in Italy, it will tell you everything you need to know as a UK citizen planning to move to Italy, and you can check what kind of documents and things that you need to consider if you are moving with an Italian national, because you may well have a different situation to me who came here just by myself. So I hope that kind of gives you a bit of a pinpoint as to how to start. But I think the south of Italy is a good choice for the weather, for the way of life personally, but it's got to be right for you. Opportunities, career progression, they tend to be more in the north of Italy. So you've really got to decide what is the best thing for you and your family in terms of what you want. And watch the video that I have posted today as well about moving to Italy, because I talk about some of these aspects in that video as well. So I think that can help you too. So I'm going to start to close the live stream for today. Thank you for joining. Thank you for being part of this. Feel free to ask me any other questions you have on the members posts. I will answer them on the post or in a future video. So feel free to reach out to me and ask me what you want to know. And I will help you in the best way that I can. And thank you for being here today. Oh, thank you so much, Abby. I really appreciate it. And I'm here. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to ask me and I will help you in whichever way that I can. Have a lovely evening and I'll see you in next month's live Hangout. Take care. Ciao for now.